test using the alternative test for positive ions, which is the sodium hydroxide precipitate test. So I've got some samples of solutions that all contain metal ions, and these are the ones that you need to know for the exam. So the first one, there's actually two different versions of iron ions. There's an iron 2 plus and an iron 3 plus. And we're going to test them, and it's very easy to see, hopefully with the precipitates, the difference between them. So this one is iron 2, and you can see there very clearly that a green solid precipitate is formed inside of the mixture when we've added the sodium hydroxide. That's a positive test for an iron 2 ion. And then we're going to do the same with the iron 3, the 3 plus ion. And in this situation, we've still got a precipitate forming, not so clear, but it's an orangey brown precipitate in this situation that's forming there. So that allows us to differentiate between the two types of iron ion. The next one we're going to look at is copper. Now you'll remember we could test using a flame test for copper. This is another test we can do for copper ions. And again, it's the same reagent, it's the sodium hydroxide. And again, when we leave it and watch, what will happen is we are getting a blue precipitate forming. So again, a blue solid forming within that liquid, and that's a positive test for copper ions, and it's just collecting there at the top. Now the next three chemicals I'm going to test are all metals that are colourless solutions. So I have got a magnesium salt, I have got a calcium salt, I'm just going to pour that one in, ready. I just need a small amount, enough to be able to see the precipitate forming. And then finally, I have got a aluminium salt there. So three colourless salts. It's really important that we should be able to identify them. So again, we're going to use the sodium hydroxide solution, and we're going to add some to each of the tubes. And what you should see there forming is a white precipitate. So with that white precipitate, it eliminates the other ions, but it doesn't give us the difference between the aluminium, the magnesium, and the calcium. So what we can then do is we can add additional sodium hydroxide and see if any of those precipitates disappear. So looking back at these again, we're looking at the magnesium, we've added additional sodium hydroxide to it, and we can still see that that precipitate is clearly there. With the calcium, again, we can still see that the precipitate is clearly there. However, with the aluminium, when we've added excess of the sodium hydroxide, then the precipitate has disappeared. So that is our way of identifying our aluminium ions. And to differentiate between the magnesium and the calcium, you could go back and do a flame test, which would give you the clear red colour for the flame test for calcium.